Metal screamed against metal. Amanda's bike hit the pavement in a shower of sparks, her body skidding half a second behind it before her palms caught the asphalt and tore it open. A car door opened above her. Slow, deliberate, like whoever was inside had all the time in the world and she had none. "Are you insane?" She was already pushing herself up, ignoring the blood beating across her palm. "You cut me off. Do you know how fast I was going?" Nobody answered her. 6 men in black had formed a loose wall around a car, so dark it looked wet, and none of them looked at her face. They looked at the long silver gash her handlebar had carved into the driver's side door. "Get on your knees," one of them said, low, bored, like this was a routine he'd performed 100 times. Amanda laughed, short, disbelieving, adrenaline doing more talking than sense. "Excuse me." The back door opened. He didn't rush. He unfolded out of the car the way certain men do when they've never once had to hurry for anyone, and the street got quieter around him. Tattoos climbed the backs of his hands, disappearing under a jacket cut too clean for a man who kept company like this. His eyes went to the scratch first, then to her. "You did that, not a question." "Your guy swerved into my lane." She was on her feet now, knees shaking in a way she refused to let show in her voice. "If anyone owes an apology." "She's bleeding," he said, to no one, and one of the men flinched at the correction in his tone, like her torn-up palm mattered more than his ruined paint job. "I don't need your pity." She wiped her hand on her jeans. "I need you to control your driver." One of the men stepped toward her, hand reaching for her arm. She didn't back up. "Touch me and see what happens." That got a reaction, not from the man reaching, from him. A flicker of amusement and warning, aimed at his own soldier, who dropped his hand and stepped back like he'd been burned. "You don't know who you almost put your hands on," one of the men muttered. "And you don't know who you're threatening." Her chin came up. "My sister is Dr. Jessica Ade, best surgeon at Hanel General. You want to intimidate somebody, go find somebody who doesn't have people." She meant it as armor. She watched it land as something else entirely. His whole body went still. "Jessica," he repeated, quiet, testing whether the name would hold weight now that it was finally out loud in front of him. "Your sister is Jessica Ade." "That's what I said." He studied her one moment too long, then turned back toward the car. "Let her go, get the bike fixed, send it to her address." "That's it, you're not going to." "Not today," he said, without turning around, and got back in the car. She stood in the street, palm throbbing, certain she'd just won an argument she didn't understand. She hadn't won anything. She'd walked, uninvited, into a promise made years before she'd ever set foot in Seoul, and the man now disappearing behind tinted glass had no intention of letting her walk back out of it. "Queens, before we go one more step into this, I need you here for what's coming, because this one gets under your skin fast. If this is your first time with me, welcome. You walked into the right room at the right moment, and I mean that. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, because I love knowing how far this story travels before it's even finished. And if you're new, hit subscribe now, because I promise you don't want to catch the next chapter of Amanda's story halfway through. This world only gets deeper from here." The retelling at the depot, the next morning, didn't go the way Amanda expected. "You scratched whose car?" Her supervisor's face had gone the color of old paper. "Amanda, do you understand what street that was? Do you understand whose district that is?" "He let me go," she said, shrugging like it was nothing, already halfway through her first delivery route of the day. "Fixed my bike too. Guilty conscience, I guess." "People like that don't have guilty consciences." Her supervisor lowered his voice like the walls themselves were listening. "People like that have reasons. You should be worried he let you go, not relieved." Amanda didn't take it seriously. She should have. Jessica noticed the new bike sitting outside their building, before Amanda even finished explaining. Someone just fixed it, for free. She turned it over in her hands like the question itself was dangerous. "A guilty one," Amanda said, dropping onto the couch, still riding the high of having stood her ground against 6 armed men and lived. "His driver caused the accident, least he could do." What did he look like? Something in Jessica's voice made Amanda look up. Not casual curiosity. Careful. Rehearsed casual, the way people sound when they've practiced not reacting. Tall, tattoos, talked like everyone around him was furniture. Amanda squinted. Why, you know him? No. Half a second too fast. Jessica went to put the kettle on and didn't turn back around until the water was already boiling. Amanda let it go. She had no idea yet what letting it go would cost her. He was outside the hospital 3 days later. Not waiting for Jessica, Amanda would learn that eventually, waiting to see if Amanda noticed him first. She did. Delivery bag on her shoulder, helmet under her arm, she stopped dead on the sidewalk. Are you following me? I had a meeting in the district. With who? Your last victim. The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The rehearsal of one immediately abandoned. You're not scared of me. Should I be? Most people are. Most people probably haven't had to fight for everything they have since they were 19. She adjusted her bag. You get used to not flinching. He looked at her like she'd said something rare. Reached out quick, instinctive, to fix the strap twisted against her collar. His hand stopped an inch from her skin. He pulled it back like it had never happened. Your strap's crooked, he said, flatter than it needed to be. She fixed it herself, watching him. You have a name. You'll learn it when you need it. That's not ominous at all. For the first time, something close to a real laugh escaped him, short, surprised out of him, gone as fast as it came. He turned and walked back to his car before she could catch him doing it twice. Amanda stood there 10 seconds longer than she meant to. Behind her, unnoticed, a nurse who'd clocked the entire exchange from the hospital doors went straight to Jessica's office. He was outside the hospital talking to your sister, the nurse said. Tall, tattoos. Everyone in radiology went quiet when his car pulled up. Jessica's pen stopped moving mid-signature. Did he say anything to you? To me, no, the nurse frowned. Why would he say anything to me? No reason, Jessica said, and finished the signature with a hand that wasn't quite steady. He started appearing, never explained, never announced. Outside the depot on a night her route ran late. At the market when she was arguing with a vendor over spoiled produce, he settled the dispute with one look and didn't wait for her thanks. Always plausible, always deniable. He never once said, I'm watching over you, and she never once let herself ask why she'd started expecting him. You're doing it again, she said one night, finding him leaning against his car outside her building. Doing what? Showing up. She stopped in front of him, arms crossed, no real heat in it now. You have an entire empire to run and you're loitering outside a nurse's apartment. I like this street. Liar. I'm an excellent liar, he said, and let her see the almost smile all the way through this time. You'd know if I was actually trying. So what, this is you not trying? He didn't answer that. He looked at her instead, the way he'd been doing for weeks, like she was a puzzle whose difficulty he respected, not one he intended to solve and discard. Go inside, he said finally, quiet. It's late. Is that concern? It's a suggestion. She went inside. She stood at her window another 10 minutes watching his car not leave. What she didn't see was the second car that pulled up across the street 20 minutes after his finally did. One of his own men, sent to keep watch after he left, an order he'd never once mentioned giving. It was Marcus who noticed first. Marcus, who'd married into the family back home before things fell apart, who'd shown up in Seoul 6 months ago claiming he wanted to make amends, who Amanda had welcomed back into her life with the same stubborn loyalty she gave everyone she loved. You've been different lately, Marcus said over dinner, easy, warm, the way he always sounded. Lighter, something good happening I don't know about. Nothing's happening, Amanda smiled anyway. Just work. Which entrance do you use at Jessica's hospital these days? I want to surprise her sometime, bring flowers, make up for lost time. East wing, mostly. Depends on her shift. Amanda didn't think twice. Family didn't need a reason. Thursdays she's usually there till late. Marcus nodded. filed it away behind an easy smile, and asked her to pass the rice. She had no idea she was handing a map to the one person, circling both her sister and the man who'd started haunting her sidewalks. She caught him in a lie for the first time on a night his men least expected it. "You said the warehouse fire was an accident." Amanda stood in the middle of 6 of his men like she owned the room. "Your own man told me they smelled accelerant." The temperature in the room changed. Nobody spoke to him like that. Nobody corrected him. He looked at her for a long moment. His men waited for the fallout. "You're right," he said. "It wasn't an accident." The room exhaled. She didn't look smug. She looked like she'd expected nothing less, and that unsettled him more than the lie ever could have. "Why lie at all?" she asked, quieter. "If you were going to admit it the second I pushed." "Because most people don't push. I forgot you weren't most people." 2 of his men exchanged a look across the room. Neither said anything. They didn't need to. Everyone there understood they were watching something that had never happened to their boss before, not once, not in years of service, not with anyone who'd sat across from him and lived to tell it. The rain caught them both 3 nights later, a sudden downpour that turned the alley behind the depot into a river in minutes, and neither of them had planned to be stuck there together. His car had a flat. Her bike wouldn't start. The only shelter for 4 blocks was the overhang of a shuttered noodle shop, barely wide enough for 2 people to stand without touching. They stood without touching for exactly 6 minutes before the cold made it impossible. "You could just say you're cold," he said, watching her arms wrap tighter around herself. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "So are you." "I don't get cold." "Liar," she said again, and this time when he almost smiled, he let it go all the way and didn't pull it back. They didn't talk for a long while after that. The silence wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that has weight, that both people are aware of holding, and neither one wanted to be the first to break it and ruin whatever it was becoming. "Can I ask you something?" she finally said. "You always do." "Why me? You could have any woman in this city not asking questions, not accusing you of lying, not calling your men out in front of you." He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because you're the only person who's looked at me in years and not seen the empire first," he said. "Everyone else sees what I have. You see what I do." "That's not always a compliment." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it honest." The rain didn't stop for another hour. Neither of them minded. "Queens, if you've ever been caught somewhere you didn't plan to be with someone you weren't ready to feel something for, that's the moment I want you sitting in with me right now. I need to know. Is a stolen hour in the rain enough to start trusting someone who still hasn't told you his name? Tell me honestly in the comments, because Amanda's about to find out the answer costs more than she thinks." The threat came on a Thursday, Marcus's Thursday. Amanda never saw the men who grabbed her outside the depot. One moment she was locking her bike, the next a cloth was over her mouth, and the world tilted sideways into dark. She woke zip-tied to a chair in a room that smelled like motor oil, and instead of screaming, she started listening, counting footsteps, memorizing voices, finding the loose bolt in the chair arm that, 20 exhausting minutes later, let her slip one wrist free. 2 men argued in low voices outside the door. She caught fragments. He's not going to just hand her over. He doesn't have a choice once she's ours. The information was supposed to buy us time, not a war. She didn't understand it yet. She filed it away anyway, the way she'd learned to file away everything useful since she was 19 and had nobody but herself to depend on. She was still working on the second zip tie when the door blew open. He didn't say her name first. He said it last, after his eyes swept the room for threats, after 2 of the men who'd taken her were already on the ground, after he'd confirmed with his own hands that the blood on her wrist was from the zip tie and nothing worse. Only then, Amanda. "I almost had it," she said, breathless, holding up her freed wrist, refusing to shake in front of him even now. "I know," he said, something in his voice cracking open that had never been open before. He knelt, cutting the second tie himself. "I know you almost had it." "How did you find me?" His hands stilled on the tie, just for a second, just long enough that later, replaying this moment, she'd understand it had been a confession she was too shaken to hear yet. "I've known where you were for weeks," he said quietly. "I just didn't move until now." She didn't have the strength to ask what that meant. Not yet. He carried her to the car himself, and for once, none of his men said a word about it. He didn't let her go home that night. Not out of control, out of fear, real fear, the kind she'd never seen on him before, and she was too drained to fight him on it. She slept in a guest room in a house she didn't know he had, and in the morning she found him exactly where he'd been the night before, sitting in a chair outside her door, awake, still in yesterday's clothes. "You didn't sleep." "I slept enough." "You've been sitting there all night." "Someone had to." She studied him, hollowed out from the night before, too tired to keep her guard fully up. "You could have had one of your men do it." "I didn't want one of my men doing it," he said, and the way he said it, plain, unpolished, nothing like the careful control he wore everywhere else, told her more than a week of almost touches ever had. She didn't say anything. She just sat down across from him, and for a while, neither of them needed to. Jessica's version of the truth came out in a hospital hallway 2 nights later, after Amanda pressed her, really pressed her, the way sisters do when they've run out of patience for careful half-answers. "6 years ago, I treated a woman in an unregistered emergency," Jessica said, staring at her hands. "Gunshot wound, no questions, cash only, off the books. I didn't know who she was until after. She was his mother." Amanda's stomach dropped. "You knew him, this whole time you knew him." "He swore a debt to our family. I told him never to act on it, never to let you find out because I didn't want you owing anyone anything for the rest of your life." Jessica's eyes finally lifted, wet, ashamed. "I didn't know he'd start watching you instead. I thought if I just never mentioned it, it would stay buried. I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I let you fall for a stranger who was never actually a stranger." "Why didn't you tell me the day he showed up with the bike?" "Because I was scared that if you knew, you'd never trust anything he did again. Not the kindness, not any of it." Jessica's voice broke. "I was trying to protect what I thought you had. I just protected it by lying to you instead." Amanda felt the floor tilt under a truth bigger than betrayal. "He's known who I was this entire time. Every time he showed up outside my building, every time it looked like coincidence." "Amanda." "He didn't fall into my life." Her voice was shaking now, finally understanding the shape of the thing she'd been circling for weeks. "He was placed there." She found him at the warehouse, and for the first time since the car's scratch, she didn't raise her voice. The quiet was worse. "Say it," she said. "All of it, no more almost truths." He didn't deny a word. "I knew who you were the second you said her name in the street. I knew about the debt before I ever got out of that car." "So none of it was real." Her voice cracked despite every effort not to let it. "The following me around, the almost touches you kept pulling back from, the night in the rain, was that surveillance too? Was I just the collateral of a debt you owed my sister?" "No." "You didn't fall for me." Each word deliberate, a blade she needed to finish drawing. "You were assigned to me." He reached for her. She stepped back before his hand landed. "I'm not something you protect out of obligation," she said. "I don't want to be managed, I want to be chosen, and I don't know any more if I ever was." She left him standing in the warehouse with nothing to say, because for the first time in longer than he could remember, there wasn't a lie smooth enough to fix what the truth had already broken. "Queens, this is the moment I need you standing with her. So like this video right now if you're with Amanda on this, because that's not a metric. That's you telling her she was right to walk. But I want the honest answer too. If a man protected you in secret for months before you ever knew his name, would that feel like love to you or a leash with better manners? Tell me which side of this you land on in the comments, because I genuinely don't think there's a clean answer, and I need to know before we go any further." She didn't speak to him for 11 days. He didn't come to her building once. Not because he'd given up, because for the first time in his life, he was letting a decision belong entirely to someone else. Amanda threw herself back into work, into anything that wasn't him, chasing the mole thread with nothing but stubbornness, And the delivery routes only a handful of people knew, routes she'd handed over herself, to family, without a second thought. She didn't yet know that thread led back to the same dinner table she'd sat at a dozen times, trusting the wrong face across from her. It was Jessica who put it together first, staring at the pattern of leaked information against a calendar of who'd had access to Amanda's schedule. "Marcus," Jessica whispered, horrified. "It's always been Marcus." Amanda didn't believe it. Not at first. Not until she laid the calendar out herself, matched every leaked route against every easy dinner conversation, and watched 11 weeks of careless trust collapse into a single, sickening pattern. She confronted him at his apartment, calendar in hand, voice steadier than she felt. "Every question you ever asked me," she said. "The entrance Jessica uses, my Thursday routes. You were never trying to make amends. You were selling us." His easy smile finally slipped, and underneath it was a man she'd never actually met. A man who'd sold information about her, about Jessica, about the family he'd claimed to be repairing, because rival money had been louder than blood. "You made it easy," Marcus said, and that, more than the betrayal itself, was the thing she couldn't forgive. "Get out," she said, "before I call someone who won't be as polite about it as I am right now." He left. He didn't get far. The men Marcus had been selling information to came for her that same night, cornering her 2 blocks from her building. For the first time, he arrived not with soldiers, not with violence waiting to be unleashed. He arrived alone, hands empty, and stood between Amanda and 4 armed men without a single weapon drawn. "You could kill them," Amanda said afterward, shaking, once the standoff had ended with words instead of blood, once his restraint had done what his reputation never could have. "You had the men to end this in 10 seconds. Why didn't you?" "Because you told me that if protecting you meant becoming a worse monster, you didn't want my protection." His voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. "I heard you." "I don't know how to prove that, except by actually listening." Amanda looked at him, really looked, past the tattoos and the reputation and the debt that had started all of this, and saw, for the first time, a man choosing to be different because of her, not in spite of her. "That's not enough," she said quietly. "Not yet." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for yet." She let him walk her home that night. Neither of them said much else. It didn't need saying. He exposed the corruption in his own organization publicly, named the men who'd sold Amanda's location, dismantled the parts of his empire that ran on fear instead of loyalty, and it cost him. Territory. Allies. Men who'd served him for years walked out the moment they realized the old rules no longer applied. One of his oldest lieutenants confronted him about it directly, disbelief thick in his voice. "You're tearing apart 20 years for a woman who won't even take your calls." "I'm not doing it for her to notice," he said. "I'm doing it because she was right, and I'd rather lose the empire than keep being the man who needed one." He didn't ask Amanda to witness any of it. She heard about it secondhand, piece by piece, from people who couldn't understand why their boss was giving up power for a nurse who wasn't even speaking to him anymore. Jessica rebuilt what she could with Amanda. Slowly, honestly, no more secrets left to protect anyone from anything. "I should have told you the day he showed up outside our building," Jessica admitted one night, both of them on the couch, worn thin from months of aftershocks. "I let you fall for a man I already knew, without ever giving you the choice to walk in with your eyes open. You were trying to protect me." "I was managing you," Jessica said, quiet, and Amanda heard, for the first time, how much that word cost her too. "Same as he was. I just told myself it was different because I loved you." Amanda sat with that a long moment. Maybe it doesn't matter why someone does it. Maybe it only matters whether they stop when you ask them to. Amanda moved into her own place not long after, built a life that owed nothing to anyone, didn't call him, didn't need to. Months later, he found her outside a market stall, no soldiers this time, no black car waiting at the curb, just him. "I heard you dismantled half your own operation," she said, not quite looking at him. "Most of it, the parts that mattered." "Why?" "Because you were right. Protecting you by becoming worse would have meant I never deserved to. She finally turned to face him fully. I don't need your protection. I never did. I know, he said. I'm not offering it, I'm offering me, whatever that's worth to you now. I don't belong to anybody, she said, the same words she'd been protecting since the day her bike hit his car. I know, he said. I never wanted you to. She studied him, the restraint in the space between them, the fact that he'd stopped reaching before she'd even had to pull away, the years of practice it must have taken a man like him to learn how to want someone without needing to own them. She took his hand. Not because she needed him. Because for the first time since a scratched car door started all of it, she believed she was choosing him, and that he'd finally learned the difference. Queens, we made it to the end of this one, and I'm still sitting with it myself. Here's the question I can't shake, and I want it from you honestly. Did Amanda take his hand because he actually earned it, or because loneliness after everything he cost her just wore her down? That's the open wound I want left in the comments tonight, because I don't think there's one clean answer. If this story gave you a little more nerve, a little more clarity about what you'd actually accept from a man who claims to protect you, stay with me, because I've got another woman's story waiting for you, and I built this whole space for exactly the nights you need one. And if there's a woman in your life who needed to hear Amanda's story tonight as much as you did, send this to her, not because it grows anything for me, but because some stories are easier to carry when you're not carrying them alone.